Hey everyone, welcome back to my Other Realms of Reality podcast. And this is part 9, where I'm going to talk about abductions and extraterrestrials. Now, this particular topic is quite hard to talk about and has been over the years for me. In fact, for most of my life, I avoided this subject like the plague. It was something that I just didn't want to know about, I didn't want to delve into. When I was in my 30s and I was very much into anything psychic, anything unexplained, this was one topic that I just avoided. There are more people talking about their experiences today, so this particular subject is a little bit easier nowadays to talk about, although it's still very much heavily criticised. And as always, before I go into my own personal experience, which I'm going to share only one today because it does span over many years, and there are various events that happened that gave me the bigger picture, which I'm going to share with you today. Before I do that, I just want to again summarize what an abduction is, but also what an extraterrestrial is, because there is certainly, again, a lot of misinformation, but also just mixed information out there about what an extraterrestrial is. And again, this is again my own personal experience and my own personal beliefs at the moment. And it doesn't mean that it's 100% accurate. It's just where I'm at the moment. So as always, please use discernment in anything that you listen to. So what is an abduction? It's when a person claims to be taken against their will by a non-human being and potentially subjected to physical examinations. These can occur when somebody is asleep and they're not aware of it, or it could be during the day where they may come across something unusual in the skies, or they experience something very unusual and have a period of missing time that they can't account for. Some people will have marks on their body or memories that are very disjointed that they can't fully understand. Some people get dreams where they will remember certain aspects of the abduction, and some people won't remember at all. It's only that they may have an anxiety that they develop and they can't explain where it comes from. But before I go on, I just want to explain here that these examples can overlap into other situations and scenarios too. It doesn't mean that you've been abducted. However, if you have mounting evidence over a period of time, or you've had such a significant experience that you just can't ignore, then it's very possible that you have had an abduction experience. It's always good to question everything that you experience, even if it is obvious, because it's only after a period of time when we look back that sometimes we will realise that there was something else at play. So I feel like from my own experience, having had this over a period of time, it's really helped me to gain more understanding of the situation and also more peace, particularly after not knowing where the fear or trauma comes from. This subject is again very, very deep, and it doesn't just cover non-human beings. And this is where it can get a little bit more uncomfortable, because my own personal experience involved both non-human and human beings, people that you would normally put your trust in. Now, just to finish off on the abduction explanation, I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible. Abductions can happen on a recurring pattern, or they can be a one-off abduction. They can be both a negative experience or even a positive experience. A negative experience that you're being used as a physical experimental tool, and the positive experience that maybe your guides are actually helping you in some way through a healing of sorts. But generally, your own body will tell you whether it's positive or negative from your own feelings. I just want to also mention again, which I've mentioned in previous parts of this series, is that anything in our reality is a reflection of where we are at. And I do believe that when we have these abductions, they are prior contracts and agreements that we've made prior to coming into this life, or even during this life. I really don't think that they are random, because every situation in our lives is a reflection of who we are. And it might be that we have chosen to experience one of these abductions to work on something from a past life, to heal something, or to even learn about it. And this has been part of my own healing and taking back my own power in the situation. Because when we're in fear, we give our power away. And exactly the same with abductions. If you've got an anxiety and you're not sure where it's coming from, it makes it quite difficult to heal that particular area and to take back your power in that situation. There are many healing techniques out there and practitioners that can help with this particular subject. If you are suspecting that you have had an abduction of sorts, or certainly something unusual that you want to find out more about, then I highly recommend looking into quantum healing hypnosis technique, QHHT. And of course, always use discernment with anyone that you go and see. It's really important, particularly with this subject, when you are going into deep subconscious parts of your brain, that you feel completely in resonance with this person and that you feel very relaxed. And you really want to go with somebody that has a lot of experience, particularly in this area. It helps because they will be able to look for signs and prompt the right questions. You also could check out other people online that have had previous experiences. I certainly did that myself and got some very good feedback. And yeah, there's many different ways to approaching this. Sometimes also people will slowly get their memories back over a period of time through their dreams, through their consciousness, and they will be able to piece things together themselves. So that leads me on to the next question, which is, what are extraterrestrials? Well, my own understanding, if you think of the Earth as being terrestrial, extraterrestrial is just something outside of the Earth. But I feel it actually goes a lot deeper than that. But let's just start with what is an extraterrestrial. Well, this covers such a wide range of beings, because if you think of even just off-planet, that's going to cover a very large area. If you think of our galaxy, our universe, and to think that we are the only beings in that universe really doesn't resonate with me, especially if you just see that new life is being discovered all the time on this planet. Some would say, well, why haven't they visited us then? Well, maybe they have. Maybe they're actually interacting with us, but we just don't realise it. Our consciousness and abilities have been so suppressed in this physical form, and that's all changing now, like I talk about in part 4, evolutionary consciousness shift. An example is with an abduction. I don't believe an abduction would happen if we were in an elevated consciousness state. If we're in a suppressed state, we don't know where it's coming from. We're easily manipulated, certainly by those lower energetic beings. But when our consciousness rises and our frequency rises, then it's going to open up other things that we didn't even know that we had access to. And one of those is awareness of other beings on this planet and off planet. So my own feelings are that an extraterrestrial can be many different beings. I believe they can fall into the category of angels, of our spirit guides, our soul families, advanced beings from advanced civilizations, beings that are more regressive, all different shapes and sizes, some that look like us, some that look completely different. some off planet, some on planet, some inside the planet, and some interdimensional. So this is where it can go into many different layers and is really down to interpretation of an individual's personal experiences. And on that note, I'm going to share my own personal experience of an abduction. I'm going to share these experiences chronologically so that you can see my own journey over a period of time. It all started for me, from my recollection, when I had a very vivid dream around approximately my mid-30s. The dream is still very clear in my memory to this day. Even though I didn't document it at the time, I can still see the images really clearly. I do not remember all of the abduction. It was as though I was only shown a brief part of it, but it was enough to give me the idea that it was an abduction. The initial scene that I saw was by a cliff face. There was an open green expansive area that was surrounded by cliffs. It didn't feel like I was in the UK, but I couldn't be sure. I just knew that the image that I was shown I would recognise if I saw it again. There was this sense that we landed in this big green expanse area, and then we went towards this cliff face which opened up as though it was a door, and we went in. There were high cliff faces surrounding this whole green area, and we went towards the right side of these cliffs. The next image I was shown in my dream was myself lying on a silver operating table and being surrounded by beings, human and non-human, although I do not recall their features. I knew I couldn't move in the dream, and this was causing me a lot of frustration because I had no control over what was happening. I also knew I was in a military installation. The next thing I woke up, those were the only images and feelings that I had from that dream. And because it was a dream at the time, there was a big part of me that was dismissing it. I just, on some level, found it very hard to believe. Even though I was feeling the emotions of frustration of not having control in this situation, and it was a very strong feeling after the dream. Well, needless to say, I dismissed it at the time because it was a bit too far away from my comfort zone. I was in a place where I didn't want to open up any doors to do with anything to do with abductions or extraterrestrials, or what I termed at the time were extraterrestrials, even though I know now that that covers a whole area of beings. At the time, I was more focused on the benevolent beings, the angels, spirit guides, things like that. I was more open to that, but I wasn't really open to the regressive types of ETs. So, as you do, I just tucked it away as one of those odd dreams that you get and continued with my life. Over the next, I'd say, couple of years, again, I didn't document this, so this is trying to remember rough times, but it was a short period of time. After about 2 to 3 years, I was taking a health product which was called silica at that time, and I knew that silica had the ability to push anything foreign out of the body, but I was actually using it at the time for my hair, skin and nails. It was supposedly a good product to use. And it must have been a good 18 months that I took this product for. But within that time period, I noticed a couple of strange things that occurred. Though I did not relate this to my abduction experience at that time because it just wasn't in my awareness or thought forms. So what happened was, over a period of about 6 months, I'd say, I had 2 objects that started coming out of my arms. They were very small, very sharp, clear objects, almost had like a 3D triangular sort of pyramid sort of shape, but were very, very small and translucent in appearance. I knew about the silica pushing foreign things out of the body, so I just assumed it was something that I'd eaten at some stage and it was evacuating the body through my skin. I remember feeling really disgusted about whatever it was and quite grossed out by it. So each time one would start to come out, I immediately just disposed of it because it was like almost like a gristle of types in sort of texture, but very solid, very firm. But yeah, so this happened twice, one in each arm, and it was the lower part of the arm. But it never happened again after that. And I stopped the silica, as I say, within about 18 months of using it. In my early to mid 40s, I went on holiday with my partner and we went to a place called the Bosnian Pyramids. And we met some really interesting people, certainly very open-minded about all of these subjects. We had often communal lunches because we were all part of a tour group. And on this particular day, there was a guy I hadn't spoken to before, was sitting on my left side and my partner was sitting on my right side. And this guy turned around to me and just looked at me and said, "You've been abducted by aliens." At the time, I kind of let out a very light laugh because part of it was a dismissal, but part of it was also something inside me was in agreement. But I didn't know this person, but he seemed to be coming from a very sincere place. He continued to tell me about his own experiences and how he helps others with this particular situation, and that he has this ability to be able to see if somebody else has had the same experiences. I remember feeling a little bit unsure at the time because, again, I had this block around wanting to go into this subject, but I was open enough to listen to what he had to say. This experience actually enabled me to start looking into this subject a little bit more. It was almost like the door opening for me because I still hadn't made the connection between the previous two experiences I shared, but I was open to it on some level, particularly the specific dream that I had. My partner that I was with was very into this particular subject, and so very encouraging for me to look into this further and watch videos together online. The next 2 to 3 years was a real exploration of this subject, but not just UFOs. It actually took me off on many different journeys and rabbit holes, which, to be fair, were quite shocking at the time, but also very liberating on some level. This then led me to my next experience in relation to this abduction. I was sitting in my bedroom of an evening, quietening my mind, ready to get ready for bed, and my cat was in the room with me. She was lying down on the bed, and I remember seeing an image come into my mind's eye of what I would describe as an insectoid being. The minute I saw this come into my vision, my cat immediately reacted and started hissing at something in the corner of my room. I immediately knew that what I was seeing was what she was seeing, and so I immediately did a clearing and cleared the area. I knew of insectoid beings because some of the videos I'd been watching when I'd been looking into this subject described them, and it was exactly what I saw. But I didn't understand fully why it was visiting me, apart from what I had learnt about abductions from watching other people's content. My cat immediately calmed down the minute I cleared the space. So this was another confirmation for me that I did see what I saw in that moment. My next experience happened about 18 months later. I was again sitting in my bed, quietening my mind of an evening, although my cat wasn't in the room with me during this particular experience. I just want to note as well that I'd just booked a QHHT session and I was due to have it the next day when this happened the night before. I saw the image of a grey alien's face in my vision, very clear, as though it was right up against my own face. And I remember its eyes were jet black, and I didn't like the feeling I got from it, so immediately went to clear it and the area. I found it fascinating that it showed up just before I had my QHHT session the following day, and was curious what the connection was. My session the next day unfortunately didn't give me any really key information that I wanted, and I was quite disappointed. But I realised at a later date how important, again, like I said earlier, it was that you go with your discernment when finding the right QHHT practitioner, and find someone that has had experience in this particular subject. That does help. However, at a later date, a medium did actually confirm that I did have this abduction, which was very interesting, and I was very grateful to have that confirmation. Going back to my last experience, shortly after that, I decided to reach out to another experiencer online, someone that was being interviewed by some of the top YouTube podcasters in this particular field. I found there was a couple of correlations to our story, although theirs was a lot more detailed and more traumatic. I told them about my experiences, including the insectoid being and the grey alien showing themselves after so long, and wondered why all of a sudden they were starting to appear in my vision. He told me that this was usually a sign of when you are delving into the subject, they start checking in on you. And that was very true of my own situation, because I'd done a deep dive, like I said, for 2 to 3 years, trying to find out more about it. He also shared some other interesting facts which were really helpful for me at that time. And looking back, I had no concept or idea of the technology that was actually available and being used out there in some of these secret projects. The fact that the cliff could just open up, I didn't know they had that technology, it was just in my dream. But clearly these were all things that were evidences for me of the genuinity of it, because I had no concept back then, and I certainly wasn't looking at any videos, and I don't even know, this was nearly 20 years ago when I had the dream, whether they actually had anybody talking about those particular technologies back then. Another interesting fact for me as well was how I just had this complete block around this subject for most of my life. And it's no surprise really, because with these regressive beings that do abductions, a lot of your memory is wiped. And yes, there are people that can access some of those memories for whatever reason, and sometimes they are not as successful at wiping them completely. So this is why some of us can recall some aspects of the abduction and some can't. But if you go into a very deep hypnosis, those memories can be retrieved over a period of time, and this is what a lot of people have experienced. I personally haven't been back to delve into this anymore. There was a period of time that I was thinking about it and interested in it, but because I've found some peace with it now within myself, certainly taken back my own power, did completely cut any cords and attachments and took back control of the situation. And ever since I actually did that, I've had no more visitations from them. And I can honestly say that there's no fear there now, because again, I understand that everything happens to us for a reason, and everything is a lesson for us to learn and heal from. And just being in that space and awareness, you're taking back your own power. Nothing can exert any influence over you if you do not give it permission. I lastly just want to share about the objects that came out of my arm. Although I have no proof of the physical objects, because I disposed of them when it happened at the time, I didn't know what they were, but I know in my own heart and mind that there was something very unusual about them. And when I looked into my deep dive of this subject, it was very possible they could have been a form of tracker. And it's very possible that I still have one of those in my body. But it really doesn't matter now. The main thing is taking back your own power and finding peace in this particular area. I do believe this is actually quite common. I don't think that I'm unique. I just believe that a lot of us maybe aren't aware of it. But there are tools and techniques, as I mentioned earlier, that you can use to delve into this if it's something that you do want to find out more about. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I know it's quite a heavy, deep subject and it might trigger some people, but I do think it's important to share this information because I know it's helped me on my own journey, listening to what other people have shared and their own experiences. Some people feel the need to find out as much as they can for their own healing. But in my own experience, you really don't need to find out all of the details in order to heal. Okay, everyone, well, I'm going to finish off there and I hope to see you soon for another part in this series. Take care, everyone.